I'm going to go over 7 misleading terms that lead you to give up your unalienable rights. Because basically, the people created the federal government. We got rid of the king, so the king's quote unquote sovereignty went to the people, and the people, it stayed there. Hasn't left. But the people created governments in order to guard against and defend that sovereignty and their freedoms. So what's happened though is that the government they created has used some schemes to get above the people they've created and make them subjects. And so I'm going to go over some of the key ways they've inflicted this deception. It's all fraud. You just have to know how to rebut it and make sure you don't use these terms because they place you under their jurisdiction. So you have to know thy rights and the right terms. So anyway, let's get on with it. So resident means resident alien, and they assume you're domiciled in D.C., where the federal government has full control. The Constitution gave the federal government some enumerated powers, so they have sort of specific things they're allowed to do, maybe within the states or to the people, but there, as far as DC go, and those are very limited, so we're still free people. But as far as DC goes, or Guam or Puerto Rico, federal government just do as they please. What they want to do is dupe you into claiming you're domiciled in that area where you become a subject of the federal government. So never say you're resident. It's actually, resident is the title for the status of resident alien. What matters is domicile. So if, don't say you're a resident of Ohio, so you'd say I have a home, not a house. Or you don't have a residence. One more thing about resident is that when like bands play in Vegas, they do a residency. Why? Because they're visiting. And when ambassadors for different nation states like visit other countries or nation states, they stay in residences. Like that's the word. It's residence. So you don't have a residence. You're not a resident. You're domiciled. You're just a man or woman on the land, or maybe you could say inhabitant. I'm not sure. The next one is U.S. citizen. That is actually means you're a citizen of the federal government. That you're subject to the federal government. So instead of being the people, which are above the federal government, if you say you're a U.S. citizen, that means you're below the federal government and subject to them. So you don't want that. A U.S. citizen also maybe be a federal citizen, or I recently like to say a citizen of District of Columbia, right? Because that's where the federal government has control. Where did this federal citizen come out of, or the U.S. citizen? It came out of the 14th Amendment, because prior to that, everyone was state citizens, but freed slaves were stateless. So the federal government, through the 14th Amendment and the states, gave them a status called U.S. citizen. So they're not state citizens. They're citizens of District of Columbia or citizens of the federal government. They don't have all the unalienable rights that state citizens have. So that's why they want you to call yourself a U.S. citizen, when in fact, we're state citizens. Moving on. So United States, that does not mean the United States of America. United States is short for like United States in Congress assembled. It means D.C., basically. It means the federal government or their operations. It's not the United States of America. Just get that point. Okay, so they want you to claim you live in the United States. What does that mean? Again, that means you're domiciled in D.C., where they have full control. So you don't want to say you live in the United States. Maybe you want to say, I live on Ohio, on the land. We're not in the land. We're within Ohio, the borders. So you want to say you live within the United States of America in a way, but it's better to say like I live within Ohio. But anyway, it's all about the United States of America, or the United States of America. You're not part of the United States. And you can ask them, like, if it says United States at the top of the document, you'd be like, well, which United States? Because it does have multiple meanings, and that's mentioned in many places. It also could mean a corporation. And that's a fact you could see on my website. That segues into the next one. So like, the federal government also created, through the District of Columbia Act of 1871, they created the District of Columbia, or the municipal corporation called DC. And as far as I know, it operates DBA does business as United States. The United States could also mean the sort of corporate entity. Why? Because so I've already kind of laid out like how they tried to get you to change your status from state citizen to federal citizen, right? So that you're below the government. The other thing they use is actually business. If you can believe that, it's crazy. But they use persons. Person means business entity. It's like persona, and it's like, or a franchise. I know it's crazy, but it's true. And that's why they ask for your identity. Why? Because it's ID entity. Entity is a finance term. Like a business can own multiple entities, or a business is an entity. And if you look up the definition of person in many of their codes, the state code, the federal code, it always says, like it'll say individual, trust, LLC, or other business entity. And individual is an adjective, okay? Where is individual? That's short for individual entity, or like a sole proprietorship. So you're not an individual, you're not a person, and you're not a franchise, right? Like you are a people, you're a man or a woman. So you're not a US person. That's another thing. It's just a franchise of this entity of DC, which does business as United States, the business, right? Like basically Washington, the federal government's allowed to create businesses. They did that with the Postal Service. So they also created a municipal corporation called District of Columbia. And I want to get on with this, but you're not a person, okay? You're just a people or a man or a land. Don't say you're a person. They say, are you that person? You say, no. Next, birth certificate. That relates to the person. Like, how did this person or franchise come about? Well, they birthed it like a ship. And it's always, and they use the word I, but they really mean the word E. And look on the top of my X feed, a Twitter feed, you'll see a great image of that. So everyone's like carrying around a birth certificate, which is like the originating document for a franchise, and they're living their whole life through this person. Why? Because then it's like you're a franchise of Burger King. Like imagine if you're cooking like burgers in the backyard, and like Burger King shows up, and it's like we don't cook burgers this way, buddy. And it's like I'm not a Burger King franchise. Okay? Like, get out of my backyard, get off my lawn, get out of my backyard. And it's like that's basically what the federal government is doing. They show up at your house and be like, "Are you this U.S. person?" If you say yes, then you have to follow all the codes of that franchise. I know it's crazy, but it's a key point to get. That's why they say like identity. It's all business. Like there's this famous saying in this genre that all crimes are commercial, and it's true. Like everything they do is like they're prosecuting the business that people are unbeknownst to them living their life through. So, for example, like you could put your car, like like if you've heard this, in the name of your business. Your car could be in the name of a business. So they have duped you into living your whole life through this person, and the person was created by the birth certificate. Well, you want to really get your hands on a certificate of live birth. That's for the baby, and they make it's now like sometimes called a worksheet, and they don't give it out at the hospital. It's so preposterous. They like they say to the mom and dad, "Oh, go order the birth certificate," which is for the person, which is a franchise. So that right there's a red flag that they don't give you the certificate of live birth, which is made at the hospital, and everyone signs it or we like to say autograph, but you got to get that from you got to get the certificate of live birth, or it's very helpful. Anyway, last two things: driver and motor vehicle. Other misleading terms. Driver means a profession, like a chauffeur. Like, where's my driver? Or call the driver. Or driver, get my car. Or a truck driver, right? So driver does not. If you don't have passengers, and passengers means paying passengers. So like, well, passengers means someone paid for the ride. So like, if I'm in a car, I'm not a driver. I'm not driving it unless someone's paying me, and if there's people there with me, they're not passengers. They're just other people in the car. All these things have to be rebutted if they say them, and ideally in writing. And don't use the term. Don't you yourself use the terms. Last thing, motor vehicle. Motor vehicle means a taxi or truck. That's it. It's not a car. It's not a truck. It's like something used in commerce or business. So if someone says like, "Is this your motor vehicle?" You'd be like, this isn't a motor vehicle. Like, like this is, or you can even like cut to it, because even that, like the sort of Leo policy officer, police officer will look at you strange, like, what do you mean it's not a motor vehicle? You could just say like, is this a motor vehicle? But like, no, it's not a taxi, and it's not a truck. It's not a cargo truck. Like that's really what they're saying. So just cut to the chase and answer it. Anyway, I hope these terms are all helpful. Most of the schemes they've done are just word, like sort of putting you under a spell. They've turned regular word. They teach one definition of the word and they use a different one. And when they use a different one, it turns a word into a term. The heart of the matter is you always want to go for the definitions in any code. You got to learn to go to the definitions page, read the definitions, and see if it applies to the. In most of the cases, it doesn't. And overall, let me restate at the beginning is that we are free people. We are still free. Everything they're doing is a fraud. It's not binding, but you have to rebut it. You have to know what the fraud is and rebut the fraud. We're free people. We're not residents. We're not U.S. citizens. We are state citizens domiciled in one of the 50 states, which is part of the union called the United States of America, not United States.